Good day. I am John Luis Eusebio from National University College of Architecture. For today's presentation, for this final project, I will present an iconographical analysis about the famous painting The Triumph of Death by Breugel the Elder in 1562. But before we proceed to the iconography analysis, let us first identify the most basic perception about the artworks. Pure form by using the first strata of subject matter or meaning in studies in iconology by Erwin Panofsky, which, which is the primary or natural subject matter. If we look at the painting, we see horrific scene of death and destruction. As we look at the upper left side of the painting, we can see the two skeletons that seem to sound the bell. Also, in the middle upper part of the painting, we can see a group of skeletons riding a horse, holding the spears and seemingly chasing the people. Also, we can see the group of skeletons lined up, and in the upper right part of the painting, we can see the skeleton trying to hang a person and execute the people. Along the foreground of the painting, we can see a king with a skeleton beside him. Also, we can see skeleton riding a chariot loaded with skulls and bones, and skeletons wearing white fabrics. Also, in the middle part, you can see the bunch of people trying to go inside the house or establishment. Also, we can see the two men fighting the skeletons using their own swords. And in the lower right part of an artwork, you can see the loving couple and the skeleton beside them. Also, a man trying to draw his sword. Now, for the history of an artwork, an oil painting, The Triumph of Death by Pieter Breugel, was was made in 1562 to 1563. Since 1827 until today, the famous painting of Pieter Bruegel hung at the Museo del Prado in Madrid, directly across from Hieronymus Bosch, the Garden of the Earthly Delights. Since Bruegel was viewed as the second Bosch, it took almost 2 years of conservation. The Triumph of Death has regained its stability and original color at the Museo del Prado, presented Pieter Bruegel's The Triumph of Death in recent years following the painting's successful restoration. The restoration of the painting was undertaken by Maria Antonia Lopez and Jose del Puente, and The Triumph of Death is now finally back to its original state. As what we can see in our presentation, you can see in the left part the unrestored painting of Pieter Bruegel, and in the right part is the painting which is already restored with the sponsor of Museo del Prado, Madrid. Now for the creator of the masterpiece, Pieter Bruegel, also known as Pieter Bruegel the Eldest, is one of the famous artists of the Renaissance era. He is also a Flemish artist and engraver. He was born as Pieter Bruegel to Pieter Bruegel. He was born between 1525 and 1530 at near Breda, Netherlands, and he died on September 1569 at Brussels, Belgium. His work of art were usually based on religious themes, lifestyle of the peasant, or proverbs that were popular in that time, and also possibly related his own life because he is also came from a family of peasants. He was trained by one of the greatest artists during his time, Coke van Eyck's, and he even married Van Eyck's daughter. His, his first biographer, Karel Mander, Karel Mander described Bruegel as very quiet and prudent man. He was a man of few words, but he was very droll in society. During his time, Bruegel created a lot of work of arts, like Hunter in the Snow, Netherlandish Proverbs, Children's Game in 1560, The Fight Between Carnival and Lent in 1529, and more. He was influenced to some extent by the work of his peer, Hieronymus Bosch. One of Bruegel's greatest work of art, The Triumph of Death, was made during that time. The style of art is the Renaissance art style. Also, that was the year when the start of war of religion was happened. This period of war and popular unrest between Catholic and Huguenots, Reformed Calvinist Protestants. It is a state it is estimated that 3 million people perished in the period from violence, famine, or disease in what considered the second deadliest religious war in European history. During Bruegel's late career, he created various works depicting religious stories and scenes from everyday life. The latter proved to be more significant and enduringly influential, generating centuries of art. Historical debate around the intended message or certain works. Bruegel lived during political trouble. Bruegel lived during politically troubling times. In the middle of 1500s, the modern day of Netherlands amongst the Belgium and Luxembourg, collectively known as the Low or Netherlandish countries, consisted of series of provinces under the rule of Habsburg dynasty in 1556. Possessions of the territories passed to King Philip II of Spain, who attempted to impose a stricter form of Catholic rule, sending the Duke of Alba to lead a brutal military campaign in Brussels to suppress all the Protestants' rebellion, and during that troubling times has also compounded a speculation over, over the interpretation of Bruegel's work. One of the examples of his famous work of art, the Triumph, the Triumph of Death, in 1562, many speculation about the underlying meaning or message what was attached in the artwork itself. Example of that, is the triumph of death depicts the end of all life in Earth. Because of the high horizon, Bruegel able to present a broad vision of death and destruction. Two narratives enacted in the horrific scene. The large narrative show death in the form of skeletons. This kind of imagery is reminiscent the medieval series known as the Dance of Death. Death's horror, similar to the visual presented in Bruegel's Triumph, were familiar to the citizens of the Antwerp at the mid-century religious wars. With the Spanish ended the peace and prosperity of the southern Netherlands and this time, the famous speculation about the underlying meaning or message in the Pieter Bruegel's artwork, The Triumph of Death, is that it relates to the Black Death. The Black Death was bubonic plague pandemic occurring in Afro-Eurasia from 1346 to 1353. It is the most fatal pandemic recorded in human history, causing the death of 75 to 200 million people in Eurasia and North Africa, peaking Europe from 1347 to 1351. The famous painting may have been influenced by later outbreak of the Black Death art. Art historians have debated Bruegel's famous painting for some time. In general, they believe it is more a statement about the spread of the disease, the triumph of death as a subject functioned in art from the 14th century and was most often presented in the form of a triumphal procession in which the dead proved its invincible power. In its meaning, the theme was close to the more popular in the Middle Age theme of the Dance of the Dead. Everyone was drawn to this dance regardless of the state, age, and gender. At the end, whatever the underlying meaning or message in that artwork, The Triumph of Death by Pieter Bruegel was undoubtedly one of his amazing artworks. It ranks among the most terrifying artworks of each of its age. That's all. Thank you.